So you've got farming, you've had a commercial appraising business for decades, and then you got into commercial, or I should say, real estate development as well. John, tell me how you got into that, and what the biggest lessons that you learned, because you build multifamily housing now, right?
Yeah, so I mean the concept was really so we'd had some success obviously in the farm side. We built some wealth, and so it was 2008. Stock market had just crashed. We were sitting in a really pretty solid financial position, so we weren't over leveraged. We weren't in the thing about ag and real estate is it's pretty stable even in a downturn.
Hmm.
Our businesses really didn't see much fluctuation. So it gave us a position to do something. Our kids at the time would have been 7 and 9, and we didn't know if they were going to be involved in the farm. There was only so much um, work we wanted to take on with a hired man. And at the time, we were farming about 4,000 acres. And, in normal businesses, you keep growing to build your wealth and expand. My thought was rather than buy more farmland, why don't we leverage our farmland and buy income real estate? I'm a commercial income, or an income property appraiser. I've watched clients build wealth. I had a different perspective because I was kind of, an expert in the property valuation side. So in 2010, we essentially built our first eightplex multifamily and got into the income property side. Um, that proceeded to now we've got 50 units in some commercial buildings, but really we went from building low cost multifamily to building more energy efficient, more sustainable. We've kind of gone through this progression, and that's kind of the direction we're working on now. um, but really it was a way originally to leverage our equity in the farm and still continue to grow wealth, and to make better use of some of the people we had in our appraisal company. um, when I look, it's funny because I mean, being in the valuation industry, I thought I knew more than I did, which is very often when you get into a new venture, right? I didn't know what I didn't know. And so I kind of had the idea that this was like buying a mutual fund because that's kind of how people look at real estate. Um, it's a lot more like owning a business, I think is the biggest takeaway that I've had. Um, Construction's a whole different thing, because we go from buying development land to building them, and then we keep them, get them financed out, and then we also do the property management or deal with tenants. So we kind of take that full spectrum. Um, but it's been, I really think multifamily is very much more like a business because I mean, who's your end customer? It's the tenant, right? So your product is the whatever they're happen to rent.
Hmm.
Um, you know, we got into uh, newer buildings for the simple reason, and I credit my wife here. Her first thought was we're going to buy existing, so we were going to buy, maybe apartment buildings built in the '80s. And she's like, well, if we take 25 years to pay off a building that's already 30 years old, we're going to have 50 or 60-year-old buildings by the time they're paid for. She didn't think that made any sense.
Hmm.
So when we got into new, um, construction, that way when they do get paid for, they're 20 or 25 years old and their longevity. But the piece that came as a bit of a surprise to me, it's an interesting business in that the type of income property you own to a large extent depicts your customer. So if the customer is the tenant, and you want to have the top 10% of tenants in your community, your property has to be suitable for that. And if you want, call it slumlord type buildings, they make money too. But now you're dealing with the tenants that occupy that space. So what happened was we ended up with the newest properties in the city. or income properties in the city. And we also took pride in them because we owned them, and it's our retirement fund. It's, when you're an entrepreneur, you have no pension. You either you pay off something or you save it. In our case, I'm better at paying stuff off than I am at putting money into the stock market. So this is really but when it's your pension fund and you control it, you treat it differently than some person who owns a building that looks at it simply as an investment. So between having taking good care of them, and treating tenants as, customers, because we're entrepreneurs, that's how we looked at them. We ended up, largely full. We've been successful at keeping them full and making returns. But it really has been a way that we could leverage what we knew from before, learn more about the industry we got into, and, continue to create wealth growth that is largely in equity. COVID was actually there too. I mean, so I had a staff member that took care of tenants directly. So we property managed our own buildings, but I didn't do it personally. And I thought I knew how our tenants were being taken care of, and I thought I knew more about the industry than I did. So COVID hits, that lady moved on, doesn't work for me anymore. And we had tenants that got laid off or couldn't go to work because of COVID. And I'm like, well, my appraisal business almost came to a standstill. I'm like, maybe this is my job for now till while I got time and we figure it out. Until I dealt directly with tenants, I didn't really understand all their problems and what they were dealing with and how they, what was important to them, and how they viewed our properties and how they viewed us. So it was really an eye opener when I was actually the guy, handing over the keys and showing units and showing up when the door didn't open, it was frozen or it was broken, or so it gave me, that was really an interesting time period, because I think it's almost like the whole thing came full circle. I mean, I knew how the development side worked. I knew how the financing side and the returns worked. But it really made it so clear to me that this is a business, and those people that occupy your space and pay your rent aren't just it's not just something that's expected, and it's part. You have to supply a service and a product to those people if you're going to have longevity. And I think that's a different perspective than I get from my customers that just own income property. They think they can hire a property manager. Property manager's going to keep it full. They're going to get a return, and it's very much more transactional than when you actually get down to the nuts and bolts of how that runs. So, I really think again, it's a different way of looking at it, but it was really an eye opener for me. I mean, we literally researched all the government grant programs and all the things that they could do to get money to pay rent and help them fill out forms. And, it was not my normal, but it was interesting how that whole year went.